The Way In, Episode 6. Interception. Chapter 1. The Man in the Window. Mara. Patterns don't lie. People do. Systems do. But patterns hold, even when everything else bends around them. That's what I tell myself while I sit in my car, half a block from the field office, watching agents come and go through the glass doors like the world is still orderly enough to be trusted. The man I watched from across the apartment complex the night the intruder used my body moves differently in daylight. Less like prey. More like someone trying very hard not to let anyone see he's carrying too much. That distinction matters. People under real pressure don't always look unstable. Some of them look cleaner, sharper, more controlled. They narrow themselves. Contain the chaos? The effort of that containment is often the most visible crack. He exits the building just after 4 in the afternoon. Same shoulders. Same pace. Same tension. Wound tight beneath the surface. He pauses near the curb, scanning traffic and the sidewalks with the practiced glance of someone trained to clock exits, reflections, and threats without making it obvious he's doing it. There's no doubt now. He's law enforcement. Not because of the building, not because of the badge clipped under his jacket, because of the way he moves through space like space can turn on him if he stops paying attention. This is the man. The one the intruder watched. The one he followed through me. The one whose name was spoken during the burner phone call. Carver. I don't know what the intruder plans to do to him. I don't know whether he intends to take control of me again and use me to get closer, or whether Carver himself is meant to become the next victim. I don't know if Carver is already being manipulated, or if what I saw outside his apartment was only the beginning of whatever pressure is being built around him. But I know this much. He is not random. People are not chosen by accident. The intruder is methodical. He looks for strain. He studies routine. He moves toward people who are already beginning to come apart under forces they don't understand. I don't need a formula for that. I watched it happen. I saw the way he sat in that car, the way he evaluated Carver through the apartment glass like a man reviewing a blueprint before demolition. He wasn't admiring him, he was assessing him. I replay the sequence again, not because I need the memory, but because I need the decision to stay clean. The apartment, the whiskey, the phone, the pacing, the call, the name, the quiet certainty in the intruder's voice when he spoke about him. Carver is being prepared for something. If I wait for more proof, I lose initiative. If I move too fast, I risk exposing myself to someone who may think I'm unstable, compromised, or part of a setup. Either way, delay favors the wrong person. I watch Carver turn toward the curb, keys in hand, and I understand something with a clarity that feels almost physical. This is not a search. This is an interception. I open the car door and step into the late afternoon air before I can talk myself into caution. The field office behind him is still active enough that agents are drifting in and out in loose intervals. Good. Public enough that he won't feel cornered. Controlled enough that he won't dismiss me as random. He notices me before I speak. That doesn't surprise me. Men who survive this kind of work don't stop noticing. Agent Carver? He turns fully now, mid-50s maybe. Tired eyes, but not dull ones. The kind of face that looks composed because it has spent years learning how not to telegraph what it's thinking. Who's asking? Mara Vale, DIA. That changes the temperature immediately. Not trust. Not even curiosity. Just recalibration. I see him take in the essentials. My posture, my age, the lack of obvious panic. The fact that I approached him outside his office instead of through channels. That last part matters most. I need 5 minutes, I say. If I'm wrong, you walk. He studies me for a beat that is just long enough to tell me he's not easily manipulated by urgency. That's good. Men who are easily manipulated can't be counted on. You've got 2, he says. I nod once. That's more than enough to begin. We start walking without agreeing where we're going. It feels less like cooperation than parallel movement. 2 people choosing not to stand still in public while something uninvited takes shape between them. I keep my pace measured. No rushing, no over-explaining. You ever work a case, I ask, when the behavior didn't match the outcome, but everything around it was arranged so cleanly that no one wanted to challenge the result? He doesn't answer, but he slows. Skepticism shifts when a question lands too close to something already unresolved. That's the first sign I came to the right man.
Chapter 2. Distance. Nathaniel. Distance creates opportunity. Proximity creates risk. And right now, I need distance. The motel room smells like old detergent, sun-baked curtains, and the faint residue of cigarettes smoked years ago by men who thought they were leaving nothing behind. Places like this have a function beyond anonymity. They remove identity. They make every day feel temporary enough that routine never fully settles in. I prefer that. The room is simple. Bed, table, lamp, television I never turn on. Spiral notebook open beside a city map and 3 folded printouts I took from a public terminal 2 counties away. Carver's office location, his apartment complex, traffic patterns between them, 2 alternate routes out if local patrol saturation changes unexpectedly. Everything I need is within arm's reach. Everything I don't need has already been discarded. Vale complicates things in ways I did not anticipate, but complication is not the same thing as threat. Not yet. I sit at the table and rewrite a line I already wrote last night. Do not accelerate because of novelty. Novelty ruins patience. Patience is the difference between a successful entry and a noisy one. Mara invites impatience because she resists elegantly. She creates the illusion that escalation would produce more information faster. That illusion is dangerous. When the host becomes interesting, the operator must become colder. I learned that years ago. Carver remains the objective. Not because of sentiment, not revenge in the childish sense. He has simply remained unresolved too long, and unresolved men in positions of insight become liabilities. He is still looking backward, still mapping old inconsistencies, still believing pattern can save him if he aligns enough pieces. That faith in pattern is precisely why he is dangerous. Men who stop believing in coincidence become capable of seeing across cases, agencies, years. Carver is already too close to the truth. He just doesn't understand the mechanism. Mara, on the other hand, is beginning to understand mechanism without understanding scale. That makes her useful. I have been in control of her long enough to know she is already moving from confusion toward strategy. She will not sit still. She will try to intervene. That is inevitable. The disciplined always believe awareness creates leverage. Sometimes it does. Sometimes awareness simply makes the next fall more educational. I stand and move to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to scan the parking lot. 2 work trucks, 1 family sedan, no law enforcement presence, no one lingering near the exterior walkway. Good. The next move depends on sequence. Carver must remain where he is long enough to expose his own habits. Mara must remain unwarned about enough of the larger plan that she acts locally. If either of them widens the board too quickly, I will need to adjust. Adjustment is not failure. It is refinement. I pick up the notebook and turn to the page where I've written Carver's recent behavioral changes. Reduced sleep, increased alcohol use, abnormal pacing, reactive phone engagement, pattern break in morning routine, elevation in personal vigilance. He's nearing the point where every external contradiction begins feeling personal. That is the sweet spot. Not collapse, not yet. Just the erosion of interpretive confidence. A man becomes easier to move once he starts mistrusting the part of himself that used to feel sharp. My thoughts shift to the voice. The teacher has been quiet lately. Not absent, quiet. Which often means approval, or amusement, or distance. The distinctions matter less than they used to. I don't need guidance the way I once did. But I still appreciate correction when I sense it. Nothing comes now. Only silence. Only the low mechanical hum of the wall unit struggling against late-season humidity and the faint vibration of traffic beyond the service road. Good. Soon enough, Mara will help me move farther through it. Not because she wants to, because she still thinks there is a meaningful difference between being involved and being used. That misunderstanding is one of the most reliable openings in the human mind.
Chapter 3. The Direction of Trust. Mara. We walk 2 blocks before he says anything. That's not dominance. That's method. He's deciding whether I'm reckless, compromised, useful, or dangerous. Possibly all 4. I would do the same in his position. He doesn't look at me while we move, just keeps enough awareness on my pace to signal he hasn't forgotten I'm there. "What case?" he asks finally. "I don't know the full case." That isn't what I asked. It's the most honest answer I have. That gets the smallest reaction. Not approval, recognition. He knows evasion when he hears it, and he also knows when it isn't entirely evasive. We stop outside a diner with tinted windows and a fading sign that probably looked modern 15 years ago. He glances in, checks the reflection in the glass before the interior beyond it. Good habits. He opens the door without inviting me in first, which tells me he wants the public setting, but intends to keep control of the transition. I let him. Inside, the place is half full. Late lunch bleeding into early dinner. A waitress leads us to a booth near the back without asking if we want one. 2 menus hit the table out of muscle memory. Carver doesn't touch his, neither do I. He leans back slightly, studies me directly now, and says, "Start with the part that gets me to stay." There are a dozen wrong ways to do this. Mentioning control too early would be one. Talking about missing time would be another. Telling a law enforcement officer I watched him from inside my own body while someone else used it would get me escorted out, or flagged, or pitied. None of those help. So I begin where the pattern begins. Have you heard of Daniel Hargrove? No. Financial case, violent outcome. Claimed he didn't remember the hours surrounding the incident. Carver says nothing. His behavior didn't fit, I continue. Not because he looked innocent, because the act itself was too directed for the explanation they gave it. You spoke to him? Yes. How? Federal transfer facility outside Washington. That makes him listen harder. Not because it's dramatic, because it's verifiable. He said something that didn't fit his case, I say. I hold his gaze long enough to make sure the next line lands where it should. He said there are others. Carver stills. Not visibly enough that someone else would catch it. I do. Interesting. People say all kinds of things when they're trying to explain behavior they don't understand, he says. Yes. I let the agreement stay simple. No challenge, no push. Then I add, but he didn't say it like he was inventing meaning. He said it like he knows more than he was willing to share. Like there was a pattern that only he could see. That line does more than the first one because pattern is the language he lives in. He folds his hands once, then lets them go again. Small sign of irritation or attention. Hard to tell yet. Why do you think any of this has to do with me? Now we're close. Can I ask you something off the record? You already are, he says. Do you always put bourbon in your coffee? I ask. Or just when you haven't slept? The silence that follows is long enough to become stale. Not dramatic, not dangerous. A silence built from a professional man deciding how much threat exists in a piece of information no stranger should possess. Have you been watching me? No, I say. I could deny it more forcefully. That would be a mistake. Instead, I tell the truth sideways. I was somewhere I didn't want to be, and you were there. That lands exactly the way I intended it to. Not enough to clarify, enough to unsettle. His expression doesn't harden. It narrows. That's better. Start over, he says. So I do. This time, I build it carefully. I tell him about the sense of displacement without naming it as possession. I tell him about missing agency while retaining witness. I tell him about watching my body purchase a burner phone and travel to an apartment complex where a man, him, was being observed. I describe the call, the name, the structure of the interaction, the tone change when Carver was spoken. I omit nothing important. I also do not editorialize. When I finish, he sits in silence for several seconds and looks not frightened, not convinced, but engaged in the specific way intelligent people engage when something sounds impossible and internally consistent at the same time. That's the doorway to trust. Not belief, consistency. I think, I say carefully, someone is operating through people, and I think they used me to find you. The waitress appears at the edge of the table like she's been summoned by tension alone. Coffee? Food? Neither of us looks at her for a second too long. Black coffee, Carver says. Then, after a beat, for both of us. He waits until she leaves before speaking again. You're either insane, he says, or you just said one of the only things I've heard in 10 years that actually explains the wrong shape of several cases. I almost smile. He catches it. Don't, he says. We're not at trust yet. No, I say, but we're at stay. That time he does smile. Barely. Maybe, he says. And maybe is enough to keep moving. Chapter 4. What he kept. Mara. We sit with the coffee after it arrives and do what professionals do when they don't yet trust each other, but have no choice except to keep talking. We trade information in pieces and watch carefully for what each piece does to the other person's face. Carver begins with questions that sound procedural but aren't. Timing, sequence, somatic detail. Did I black out or witness? How long did it last? What changed first? The body, the perception, the intent. His vocabulary is controlled. He avoids words like possession, paranormal, or delusion. That restraint earns him more credibility with me than belief would have. I answer in the same spirit. Displacement, not unconsciousness. Delay, not dream. Awareness without agency. Controlled movement. Purposeful behavior. Use of my body as instrument, not disguise. When I tell him the intruder searched Daniel Hargrove first before leaving my apartment, Carver's fingers tap once against the mug. Not random. Recognition. That matters, he says. Why? Because if he checked the case first, he was assessing exposure. Not curiosity. Exposure. That fits too cleanly to ignore. So he's been thinking this way already. He asks what the intruder sounded like. I give him the southern cadence, the calm tone, the references to Quantico. When I repeat the line from the burner phone, Carver was wrong. He looks down at the coffee and says nothing for a long moment. Tell me about Daniel, he says finally. So I tell him. The transfer facility. The quiet way Daniel spoke. The description of pressure. The delayed mirror. The sense of another presence behind his thoughts. And then the line that matters most. There are others. Carver closes his eyes briefly. Not disbelief, fatigue. When he opens them again, something in him has shifted. Still skeptical, but no longer positioned against me. Positioned with the problem instead. That's not the first time I've heard a variation of that, he says. From whom? He shakes his head once. Not yet. Fair. Then he says, come with me. This time there is no pause between the statement and the motion. He tosses cash on the table, though neither of us touch the coffee much, stands, and heads for the door. I follow. The apartment is closer than I expected. That means one of two things. Either he likes to stay near work because obsession has compressed his life, or work is no longer the thing he's actually oriented toward. When he opens the door and lets me in, I understand immediately which one it is. The walls are covered. Not the caricature version of obsession. No red string, no manic chaos. This is organized, deliberate. A second workspace that became a private archive because whatever he was seeing no longer fit comfortably inside official systems. Case files stacked in labeled groups, photographs mounted in clusters, timelines written on large sheets and pinned in sections by geography, not year. Multiple cases marked with the same phrases. Blackout. Directed violence. Behavior inconsistent with stated motive. No memory/partial memory/displaced witness language. I stop in front of one wall and feel my breath catch. Daniel's case is here. Not in full, just clippings, case notes, a transfer memo, and a printed still from courthouse footage with something circled near his mouth. Carver sees me looking. I've been collecting these for years, he says. Cases where the explanation given was psychologically convenient and behaviorally wrong. He moves beside me and pulls a file from a stack on the dining table. Inside are photocopies of interviews, cross-referenced by language rather than charge. He wasn't the first, Carver says, and he won't be the last. Do you know who has been doing this? I ask. He doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he hands me another file. This one older. East Texas. A child murder. I don't know the full story, but I know enough from the way he watches me read the first page that this is where the wound begins. I had a partner, he says quietly. Brilliant profiler. Too certain too early, too often. A mind for pattern that crossed a line into something I could never fully prove. I look up at him. The wrong man was convicted, he says, then executed. A few weeks later, a second case surfaced that confirmed it. And your partner? Fell hard enough to be removed, not hard enough to disappear. I feel the room pulling tighter around us, not with fear, but with resolution. Pieces moving toward the same center. The intruder said your name, I say. He used my body to watch you. He believes you matter. Carver nods once, but there is no satisfaction in being right about this. No, he says. He believes I'm unfinished business. Then finally, he gives me the one thing I came here for without knowing I came here for it. Nathaniel Robbins. The name lands hard. Not because it solves anything, because naming a predator makes him feel physically closer. My former partner. And with that, the room rearranges itself. This isn't an anomaly anymore. This is a man, a method, a history, and I am standing inside the life of the only person who has been trying to prove that history long enough to become dangerous to it.
Chapter 5. What Stays Hidden? Nathaniel. Rooms tell the truth faster than people do. That's why I prefer motels. They are honest about impermanence. Honest about appetite, failure, exhaustion, and transactions people don't want remembered. There is no ideology in a place built to be left. No sentimental architecture pretending permanence is a virtue, just function. Carver's apartment, by contrast, would be unreadable to anyone less patient than I am. It would look organized, professional even, but I know what obsession does to domestic space. I know what happens when a private question becomes more real than public life. The walls stop being walls. They become memory systems, externalized cognition, a man's mind spreading itself where he can keep watching it work. He has done that. I do not need eyes inside the room to know it. I know him well enough to predict what he would keep and where he would keep it. I know what kinds of files he would preserve outside official systems, how he would label them, how long he would tell himself the collection is temporary before admitting he has built a second bureau in his own home. What I do not yet know is whether Mara has found him. I suspect movement, a slight shift in the pressure field around her. Not entry, not access, just movement. Intention often announces itself before action does. Good. Let her move. Movement reveals shape. I sit at the table, map open beneath one hand, and listen to the wall unit cough stale air into the room. The notebook in front of me contains 3 columns now: Carver, Mara, Root. Under Root are the intermediary points, the law enforcement contact, the old case threads, the administrative choke points that will make Carver feel seen from too many directions at once if properly manipulated. Pressure should never arrive as a single event. A single event can be named, contained, survived. Pressure works best when it acquires the quality of atmosphere. I think about Mara's apartment, her books, her controlled surfaces, the way she arranges ordinary life to look unremarkable while every object is placed for rapid recovery if necessary. She learned early that order is defensive. That makes her useful, because defensive minds always believe awareness gives them time. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it only gives them front-row seats. If she has approached Carver, that presents opportunities as well as complications. He will distrust her first. Good. Distrust forces conversation to move slowly, without emotion, making it easier to predict. If she is smart, she will give him patterns before she gives him conclusions. If he is still himself, and I believe he is, he will respond to pattern even while resisting explanation. That means they will become dangerous together faster than either one would alone. Which also means I have less time than I prefer. I open a drawer in the motel nightstand and remove the fresh burner I purchased that morning from a pharmacy 3 towns over. The packaging lies already torn in the trash. Battery seated, numbers memorized. Use window. 1 contact, maybe 2, then discard. I do not call, not yet. Calls create sequence, and sequence should only begin when the board is aligned enough that every piece can move without colliding too early. The teacher has said nothing today. That is not absence. That is restraint. He knows the same thing I do. This phase does not require instruction, only execution. My hand pauses over the notebook, and I write 1 line in the margin beside Mara's name. Do not mistake persistence for control. It's a note to myself more than to the process. She is adapting. That much is true. But adaptation is not mastery. People mistake their ability to witness danger for an ability to govern it. Carver made that mistake for years. Mara may be making it now. The next entry will tell me which. And if she has in fact moved toward him already, then the next entry may arrive sooner than I intended. That is acceptable. Not ideal, but acceptable. Every foundation changes when load shifts. The skill lies in changing with it before collapse becomes visible.
Chapter 6. The board is alive. Mara. I leave Carver's apartment after dark. Not because the conversation is over, because it has become too important to continue while tired. That's the excuse we use, anyway. The truth is more dangerous. We both needed time to believe the other person was real. By the time I step into the hallway, I am carrying copies of 3 case summaries, 2 names that mean nothing yet, and 1 truth that changes everything. Nathaniel Robbins exists. He is not a theory, not just a presence, not just a voice moving through my body with a southern cadence and a patient appetite for being invasive. He is a man, former FBI, behavioral analysis, Carver's former partner. And whatever the origin of his ability actually is, trauma, delusion, something older, something organized, he has been using it for years. I stand outside the building for a moment longer than I should, looking at the parking lot, the neighboring windows, the ordinary dark of other people's lives. It all feels slightly unreal, not because anything is distorted, but because scale has changed. I had thought I was dealing with an isolated predator. A brilliant one, maybe. Dangerous, certainly. But singular. He isn't singular. Daniel Hargrove's line returns now with a different weight. There are others. I don't know whether that means others like Nathaniel, others like the man who answered the burner call, or others like Daniel. Used, broken, carrying actions they cannot fully claim. Maybe all 3. What matters is that the world is larger and dirtier than it was yesterday. Carver had watched me carefully once he gave me Nathaniel's name. Not for my reaction to the name itself, but for what I would do with it. That's how trust actually begins among people like us. Not with confession, with observed use of sensitive information. I didn't overreach. I asked the right questions. What did Nathaniel become after termination? How many cases had Carver privately flagged? Did anyone else in the Bureau know? Did Carver think Nathaniel acted alone? That last question mattered most. Carver didn't answer directly. He said, "I used to think one man with enough access and enough pathology could explain it. I don't believe that anymore." Then he showed me Daniel's case, cross-referenced against 6 others from 5 states, each with some version of the same language. Blackout, missing time, didn't feel like myself. Watched myself, not me. Not enough for a prosecutor. Too much for coincidence. Now I sit in my car outside his apartment building with the copies on the passenger seat and the heat turned off because I need the chill that has arrived this evening to stay sharp. I should go home. I should sleep. I should call my father, if only to hear a voice that doesn't belong to this mess. Instead, I open my notebook and start writing while the details are still hot. Carver's skeptical, but engaged. Trust conditional. Apartment equals independent archive of blackout pattern cases. Nathaniel Robbins, former profiler, terminated after wrongful conviction tied to East Texas child murder. Carver believes Nathaniel continued pattern after termination. Unknown higher contact on burner call. Possible network. I stop there. Network. Even writing the word feels like stepping onto unstable ground, because that part of the story still belongs more to Nathaniel than to me. Carver knows nothing about a network yet. I know nothing except Nathaniel is talking to someone else. If I say too much too soon, I contaminate the pattern with interpretation. Grounded. Stay grounded. The steering wheel feels cool under my hands when I grip it. Good. Real. Present. Then I feel it. Not full pressure, not entry. A flicker. Just behind the eyes. The same impossible half-second lag, gone almost as soon as I recognize it. I freeze. No shift follows. No loss of agency. No movement in my left hand. No displacement. Just a message, or a warning, or the echo of anticipation, because I now know his name, and knowing names alters the shape of fear. I exhale slowly and look back toward Carver's apartment building. Lights on in the corner unit. One silhouette crossing the living room. He's still awake. Of course he is. Men who spend years building private archives of impossible patterns don't suddenly become restful because one stranger confirms they were right to doubt reality. We are both on the board now. That's the clearest truth in the room. Nathaniel must be physically somewhere nearby. Not here. Not now. I know that with the kind of certainty instinct occasionally grants before logic catches up. If he were close enough to act, I think I would feel more than a flicker. The pressure would be deeper. The room would already be changing. That means tonight's meeting likely went unnoticed. Likely. In this story, likely is the most dangerous word there is. I start the car and pull away from the curb, watching the building shrink in the rearview mirror. For the first time since this began, I am no longer alone with what happened to me. That should feel like relief. Instead, it feels like acceleration. Because now there's a second mind in the game, a second witness, a second person Nathaniel may decide has reached the point of usefulness. And the next time he opens the door, I won't just be watching him. I'll be trying to stop him. That thought should terrify me more than it does. Maybe that's what changing feels like before you admit it has happened. Maybe that's what happens when fear finally finds structure. Or maybe this is what Daniel meant when he said the second time makes you a participant. Either way, the board is visible now. And somewhere off a highway, in a room built for anonymity, Nathaniel is waiting for the next move. So am I.